Hey, it's Rosie. Let's get topical. So, I saw Avengers Endgame, and then I let all my thoughts about Endgame sit in my head for about a week to really percolate. And here's the thing. Endgame demonstrates in a concise way the MCU's decade-long problem with female heroes. That's not to say I didn't enjoy Endgame. I felt it was a net positive experience, really. But it really does show the weaknesses and how the MCU has dealt with female heroes, specifically in doing a poor job overall of considering the thoughts, experiences, and motivation of female heroes when we do occasionally even manage to get them. Allow me to explain. Obviously, this will have major spoilers, and I can't really use a lot of footage from the movie for obvious reasons, so you've been warned. So the one thing about Endgame that made me actually, angry was Natashas' death. Part of that was a very fan-ish reaction. Great, you permanently murdered a character I really liked. Literally the only woman on the original team, in a way that didn't feel particularly satisfying on a narrative level. It's not like the movie took the time to establish that, the Avengers was the only family Natasha ever had, so her dying for them would have some narrative weight. Or that she felt like she never had a family like she wanted, so she would die to give Clint his back. I kind of feel like both of these were hinted at, but not fully developed, so her death felt very unsatisfying on a narrative level for me. But from a more analytic space, Natasha's death and how it plays out reveals that the Russos just don't really think about how women think. They tend to write their female characters on a very shallow level and don't really consider them complexly when crafting the narrative. Because it is really convenient that you need to sacrifice someone you love for the Soul Stone. And basically, the only two people around who could fit that description are picked, seemingly at random, to go on the Soul Stone mission. How convenient! If, Thor and Rhodey had been picked for that mission, they'd have been screwed. Very convenient. That feels like lazy writing, honestly. But if there had been no way around it, I would have let it slide. But then, Nebula. Nebula is there, and Nebula knows what has to happen to get the Soul Stone. She knows what Thanos did to Gamora to get it, and it seems like the writers just forgot that she knew that. Because there's never a moment where Nebula says, "So hey, about the Soul Stone." And we never get a moment, which would have made more sense, that indicates that, one, Nebula realizes what has to happen to get the Soul Stone, and two, makes it so Natasha and Clint, the only two people who could reasonably get the Soul Stone, are on that mission. Which would have made sense and wouldn't have required more than a few seconds to convey. In all the time heist planning, they talk about the Soul Stone. We get a shot of Nebula having the realization. She looks around the group. And then she suggests Nat and Clint go on that mission. It would have been in character for Nebula to make that choice, given her a nice character moment where we see that really she's still only tenuously a hero because she's okay with that sacrifice and is engineering it to happen. And it would have made the fact that Natasha and Clint are on that mission feel less like lazy convenience writing. But we don't have that. And I think it's because the Russos just didn't take the time to consider what all these characters had been through and where they were coming from. Which is weird, because that's kind of the whole point of the time heist, to remember where these characters are from, where they started, what they've been through. They even try to do it with Nebula, showing past Nebula dealing with Thanos, but they don't do it consistently. Unless it was all the weirdness of making Nebula murder herself, which I have conflicted feelings about. It just feels like the writers didn't really see exploring the inner lives and thoughts of these female characters as important, unless it was to get one of them killed. And this problem of not taking the time to consider the thoughts and feelings of female heroes that we do have carries throughout the entire film. And on some level, it's not even exactly anyone's fault. Endgame was clearly written to be a love letter to the original 6 Avengers, and only one of them, Natasha, is a woman. Oh, sure, we had had female characters before as girlfriends and mothers, but not as heroes, not as part of the team. The more recent Marvel movies, especially Black Panther and Captain Marvel, really seem to be trying to fix this, introducing Valkyrie and Okoye and Shuri and Carol and Hope and Wanda, Gamora and Nebula and Mantis. We see a real effort to get more women into the action. But those characters weren't in the original Avengers lineup, and so they aren't focused on in this film. A lot of them were snapped, and the rest were kind of ignored. Natasha and Nebula are the only ones who I would really consider main characters. So part of the reason there's so few female characters front and center in this movie is that it took the MCU a long time to get a reasonable amount of female heroes on screen. This movie couldn't go back in time and retroactively fix that, after all, even with Pym particles. And no, not every character can be a main character, and wanting this movie to say goodbye to the original team makes sense, especially given that Tony and Natasha die and Steve and Clint retire, Thor's going off-world again, and Hulk is, Hulk. I can't even be angry that Carol and Valkyrie weren't main characters. That's just not what this movie was about. And I get that. And once the snap is undone, we do see all these characters have small moments. We see Pepper in the rescue armor. We see Carol getting backup from Valkyrie and Hope and Okoye. Wanda fights Thanos for a minute. And it's like the MCU is trying to promise us that they're working on getting more women on screen, but the rest of the movie just doesn't really take any time to consider what the women who are still alive would think and feel and do. When the time heist is planned, it's the original 6 Avengers plus Nebula and Scott for plot reasons. Could have been Hope and not Scott, but hey, Scott is funnier. Which, again, I get that this is a love letter and a goodbye to that original lineup, and I wouldn't even want to change that. But the movie doesn't stop to ask, why aren't Carol, Okoye, and Valkyrie helping with this? Not even to get them on the team, but just to, consider them. And very similar to the Nebula issue before, fixing this wouldn't have been hard or time-consuming. There could have been a 5-second conversation where someone suggests inviting them, but there aren't enough Pym particles. Or hell, they call up everybody with the hologram Skype group chat and ask them. Carol is busy off-world. Okoye thinks it's foolish and needs to be here for her people. Valkyrie says that if they're taking Thor, she needs to stay with her people on New Asgard. That would have set up her role as the new queen at the end better, and it also would give us a reason why they aren't there, instead of just lazily hoping we don't remember they're around and wondering why they aren't helping. It's time travel. It's not like they needed to get the mission started quickly and couldn't wait to call up their allies. And there's other female characters whose thoughts and feelings are also kinda ignored. I like that Steve got to have his happiness with Peggy, but the movie doesn't really seem to care how Peggy felt. We see her in the time heist, and she seems fine. Not to mention, the TV show established that she gets a husband, and this movie kinda doesn't care about that. We get to see Freya, but she's really just there to comfort Thor, and we actually get to see Jane, but she never even speaks. These all feel like shoutouts to the early movies, and they are, but the female characters in them are just kind of props, and they aren't main characters, they aren't meant to be, but it's just part of this pattern where we only spend time thinking of the feelings and the thoughts of the men in the movie, especially the white men in the movie. And this is the culmination of 10 years and 22 movies that, by and large, until very recently, haven't put women in the main character action roles. So now, at this big emotional finale for this era of Marvel, the female characters, and non-white characters they have managed to accumulate aren't given any thought or focus. And that's mostly because they were introduced late to the franchise, and the ones we did have in this film weren't really given much thought. I don't really think that this alone makes Endgame a bad movie. Like I said, I enjoyed it. It has a lot of good moments, like Steve with Mjolnir, and lots of good jokes, and it really felt like the end of this era and an introduction to the new one. Now, my hope is that now that we are in this new age of the MCU, that we no longer have Tony or Steve or Natasha, that we have these new heroes and new female heroes, this will improve. Think back to that scene in the final battle, where it was just all the female heroes on screen together. I'll be honest, it felt kinda cheesy. But there wasn't really any explanation for why only the female heroes were helping Carol, so I don't know if that was supposed to be a hint for an A-Force movie, or if it was supposed to appease people like me who would be annoyed with the lack of female characters elsewhere in the film, or if it was a promise that they hadn't forgotten that these characters exist, but I'm gonna hope that it was the first and the last. Give me A-Force and give me these female heroes in more central roles moving forward. Now, I highly doubt that this is the last video I'll make about Endgame, but thanks for watching it. If you enjoyed listening to this queer millennial feminist rant for a few minutes, do all the YouTube stuff, and check out my Patreon to vote on an upcoming video topic. Thanks, everybody!